Okay, Hare Krishna. Welcome to our regular Bhakti Sastri class. So we will start as usual with the Mangalacharan prayers in order to invoke auspiciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Shwapadantikam Vande Aham Sri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Sri Rupam Sagra Jatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vidam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savarutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Visakarmitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesa Gopika Kantha Radha Kantha Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanespari Vrishabhanu Stuti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaisnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaurava Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So in the 14th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, we were discussing about the three modes of material nature. And the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it started with the description of the material tree, which is compared just like a banyan tree, but the root is upside down. So this tree is upside down, the root is on the top. It is situated on the top, Urdhva Moolam. So this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. So that's the connection between the 14th chapter and the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And of course, in another place, Srila Prabhupada also explained that it is natural because throughout our discussion since the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, that devotional service is very much emphasized. Even in the 14th chapter, by the end of the 14th chapter, we're discussing that how actually by performance of devotional service only, unalloyed devotional service only, one can be freed from the entanglement of the three modes of material nature. And Srila Prabhupada in one lecture mentioned that it is natural, a question may raise. Okay, we were discussing about devotional service. And what about the Vedas? So the 15th chapter also we will be discussing about the what is the purpose of the Vedas, and that will be specifically explained in the 15th verse of this chapter. So, and it will be concluded also by the end of this chapter that those who are performing devotional service, those who are worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is actually achieve the purpose of all the Vedas, achieving the purpose of all the Vedas, because ultimately the Vedas uh, main instruction, we can say that the main instruction of the Vedas is to engage in devotional service to the Lord. Krishna also mentioned in the second chapter, if you still remember, in the second chapter, text number, what is that? I think 46. Yavan artha udapane sarvata samprutodake tavan sarvesu vedesu brahmanasa vijanatah. Brahmanasya vijanatah. So just like uh, small wells can fulfill some purposes, but that all these purposes can be served immediately at once by a big reservoir of water. So similarly, those who know the purpose, those who know the purpose of the Vedas, which is performing devotional service, is actually he knows the all Vedas, because that's the ultimate goal of Vedic study. those who are studying the Vedas but but do not achieve this goal, which is performing devotional service to the Lord, is simply srama eva hi kevalam, simply wasting of time. So with that brief introduction, we shall start the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita entitled The Yoga of the Supreme Person or Purushottam Yoga. So normally in the month of in the Purushottama Mass, so the devotees normally recite this chapter every day, the verse. And for those who are reciting this for 1 month, will automatically know all the verses by heart. Yeah. Chapter 14 describes the modes of nature, those forces that restrict and control the soul within his field of activities. Now Krishna, using the allegory of an aswata banyan tree, described the entire material world with its varieties of field and activities situated on higher and lower branches of that tree. So there will be two parts of our discussion today. So we try to cover till text number 11. So the first part is that 1 to 5, becoming detached from the material world, is actually from the first and the second verse they are actually describing about the material tree, describing how is that tree looks like, what are the roots, what are the twigs, what are the leaves, what are the branches. And then from 3 to 4 is actually the formula by which we can free from the material entanglement. What is the mean to cut this material tree? And the fifth verse will be describing about the process of surrender. Okay. And 6 to 11th verse will discussing about the transmigration of the living entities. So of course we had been discussing actually both this topic in the previous verse. We are discussing about the three modes of material nature. That's actually enough to give us a gist by which actually this material world is entangling us. And then this one, transmigration of the living entities, we discussed this in the second chapter. But again, Lord Krishna gave this knowledge to Arjuna, just like every morning we need to set up an alarm to get up in the early morning for Mangalarati. So every day we have to remind ourselves it's time to get up for Mangalarati. So it could be also the same reason that Krishna is giving this instruction again to Arjuna, because of course there's no doubt Arjuna is highly intelligent person, but we in the Kali Yuga we have this Manda Sumanda Matayo. We are less intelligent, we are unfortunate, and memory is so short. So it's good for us to remind ourselves again and again. Okay, we start with here is Srila Prabhupada. Actually, this is from the first purport of this chapter, but I put it here in the beginning because it's very instructive, interesting, and good for starter. Okay, so Prabhupada mentioned in the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is best way. Now the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. Of course, in the 14th chapter also, as I mentioned earlier, that we were discussing that how devotional service can help us to free us from the entanglement of the three modes of material nature. And Srila Prabhupada mentioned here 2 points very nicely. That first one is that detachment from the material world, and second is that attachment to Krishna's service. Because these two things actually go hand to hand, they go together, they cannot be separated. We cannot be completely detached from the material world without attaching ourselves to Krishna's service. And also we cannot serve Krishna nicely without developing the sense of detachment from the material world, because they go ill together. Attachment to Krishna lotus feet and attachment to material things, they go ill together. So attachment to Krishna's lotus feet will go together with attachment from mundane things. Okay, the first verse. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Urdhva Mulamadasakam Aswatam Prahuravayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Vedasa Vedavit. So this is the tree. Urdhva Mulam. Urdhva Mulam means the root upward, Ada Sakam, and the branch downward. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and it branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned, the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. 3 times Srila Prabhupada mentioned here, to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end. And for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. These trees' roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located and the topmost planet of this universe. If one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. Continue. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire. Just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in this reflected material light. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. So just like if we stand in the front of mirror, so what happened? For example, if I raise my right arm, so the reflection will show that the person who is there in the front of me is actually raising his left arm. So this tree, this material world is actually a reflection, a perverted reflection of whatever is there in the spiritual world. So for example, Srila Prabhupada mentioned many times, actually love in the material world, the original love in the spiritual world, mentioned, that becomes lust in the material world. So this three being reflected because of our material desire. That's why Srila Prabhupada mentioned in his purport that desire is the cause of why we are here. Desire, as we discussed many times about this Ichadvesa verse. Okay, so everything is exists in this material world is also exists in the spiritual world, but in different quality. Okay, we have so-called love here, but actually that what we call love is actually lust, is actually lust. Srila Prabhupada even mentioned that there is no real love in this material world. What people call love is actually lust. So it just perverted reflection of everything which is there in the spiritual world. Everything in the spiritual world is eternal. Here is everything temporary. In the spiritual world, full of bliss. Here, full of miseries. So things like this. So the only way how to cut off this tree of material entanglement is by detachment. By detachment. Yad anudyasina yukta karma granti nibandhana chindanti kovidastasya kona kuryat katharati. So this is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam that karma granti here karma, I think that will be in the next verse, that the branches is actually the root is actually, there is also part of this tree which is the root which goes down, and this root is actually the uh, fruitive activities, the karma. So karma granti, so the karma, the result of our activities is actually binding us the most here. So karma granti nibandhanam chindanti kovidastasya. But we can cut it off. We can cut it off. Chindanti. Chindanti means to cut. Chindanti kovida. Kovida means those who are intelligent. Chindanti kovidastasya. Kona kuryat katharatim. And that sword that we can use is started by the process of hearing. Kuna kuryat katharatim, and the verse mentioned here is that Kuna kuryat katharatim, who will not be attracted to hear the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which actually can sever the knot of the karmic reactions. Okay, text number 2. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive action of human society. Yeah, this is the one that I was referring earlier, just a few seconds ago. So the roots, of course, we see that this, you just have a look to the picture here, that actually the top root is occupied by Brahma, and whatever root going downward, that's actually this one, the fruitive action of human society, different planets, and especially the earthly planet. The earthly planet is called as the field where we can actually create our karma, because in the hell we are just both in the hell and in the heaven, actually we just burning our karmic reaction, and also in the life of the animals. So in the earthly planet, in the human form of life, that is the chance for us to create our bad or good karma. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. So the three modes of material nature is playing a very big role here to give nourishment to this tree. Otherwise, the material the material world will not be exist without the three modes of material nature. Okay, all activities carried out by the three modes of material nature. Uh, these are actually the agencies of the Lord, by which everything is put into place. Everything is directed by the three modes of material nature. Why we are influenced by, as we discussed in the previous chapter, why we are influenced by goodness, passion, and ignorance. This is the agents, the three modes of material nature, how we behave. Sometimes we are nice, sometimes we feel like very energetic, very enthusiastic. Sometimes we feel so lazy. Sometimes we feel like, very easy to be angry. So these are enacted by the three modes of material nature. The tendencies toward piety and impiety are considered to develop from these secondary roots, which spread in all directions. The real root is from Brahmaloka, and the other roots are in the human planetary systems. After one enjoys the result of virtuous activities in the upper planetary system, he comes down to this earth and renew his karma or fruitive activities for promotion. This planet of human being is considered the field of activities. Mm. Tetam bhuktva swargaloka visalam sine punye martya lokam vishanti. So sine punye martya lokam vishanti. One who is situated in the higher planetary system, after his piety finished, so he has to come down again to this material world. Sine punye martya lokam vishanti. So this earthly planet is called Martya Loka, the place of death, Martya Loka. And here we can create, whether good or bad, piety or impiety. So this is the place. And actually, this is the ideal place. The earthly planet is an ideal place by which we can uh, cultivate devotional service, because in the heavenly planet we are enjoying so much, too much happiness, then we forget of inquiring about the absolute truth. And in the hell, too much miseries, too much suffering, and we don't think also, we don't even think to perform devotional service because it's so painful. Our concern is that how can I get rid from here, when this will end, when this suffering, when these miseries will end. But here in the earthly planet is actually, there is a balance between happiness and distress, little happiness, distress, and it's just like very dynamical, sometimes happy, sometimes not happy. So this is the best place actually to cultivate devotional service to the Lord. Text number 3 and 4. The real form of this tree cannot be perceived. So those two verses, 1 and 2, is actually the description of the material tree. So this 3 and 4 now is the description of by what means that we can cut off this material tree. Translation: the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, or where its foundation is. But with determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. Thereafter, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns, and there surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything began and from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So in this purport, Srila Prabhupada also mentioned that if we trace out our family lineage, so from our father, grandfather, great grandfather, da 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 da, and so on, and finally we come to Lord Brahma, and finally we come to Mahavishnu, and finally, da 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 da, Chaturvyuha, Balaram, and Krishna. Therefore, Vasudeva Kutumbakam, we are all actually one family, the family of Vasudeva, Krishna. So if we trace out our history, we come from Krishna. That will be described in the later chapter. But here it is mentioned that no one, what is that? No one can understand where it ends, where it begins. That means there is a possibility of understanding where it comes, where it begins, how it begins, this material tree, how it begins, how it started. There is a possibility, and that is when we get contact with the devotees of the Lord. Otherwise, we are just like, you know, a small ant which is get lost in the big forest, for example. We can say like that. So this weapon that we can use to cut down this tree is asanga. Asanga means detachment. Sastrena means weapon of detachment. Yeah. And how to develop detachment? That's definitely, and the only means is actually by performance of devotional service. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayatyasu Vairagyam Gyanam Chayadahai to come. So another word in Sanskrit for detachment is Vairagya. So Sangha means association, and Asanga means to disassociate. So disassociate means to become detached, Vairagya. So Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. This is actually from the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.7. So by engaging ourselves in the Lord's service, Lord Vasudeva's service, two things happening automatically. That is Vairagyam and Jnanam. We get detachment and we get knowledge. So knowledge is very important. Otherwise, if we don't have knowledge, how we can be detached from this material world? Knowledge here refers to the spiritual knowledge, transcendental knowledge. And knowledge can be derived by hearing process. Therefore, I highly recommend all of us to read the Srimad Bhagavatam 7th canto, chapter 14. This is actually meant for the householders, and most of us here, most of us here, householders. So this chapter entitled Ideal Family Life. This is actually the instruction of Srila Narad Muni to Yudhishthir Maharaj. So Yudhishthir Maharaj on our behalf, he is inquiring Srila Narad Muni about the what needs to be done in the family life, and what are the duties, what are the responsibilities of those who are in Grihastha ashram. So Yudhishthir Maharaj inquiring this to Srila Narad Muni. And the first thing Narad Muni mentioned is that first, those who are Grihasthas, first duty is that to always depending upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Always depend on Krishna. This is his first instruction, Narad Muni's first instruction. And then second, the Grihasthas should always engage in devotional service, and that start with hearing. The Grihasthas must spend sometimes out of 24 hours. We have to spend at least 1 hour in hearing Krishna Katha. So hearing, there actually in that chapter it is described that by this process of hearing, one can actually gradually becomes detached from his wife or from her husband or from family members or wealth whatsoever. This process of hearing is very important. It's very potent. One of the five most potent angas mentioned by Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So Shravanam is the first and foremost, actually. The first and foremost activities. Uh, Shravanam and Kirtanam. These two things, first and foremost activities in our life, actually. So it's very nice if you just spend your time later, just read this chapter 14, Canto 7, Srimad Bhagavatam. Very, very instructive. And I feel that's very relevant for all of us. Even if you are not a grihasta, but it's still good to know. And of course, Narad Muni mentioned many things how the grihastas should spend their money. There are 5 ways that the grihastas should spend their money. So you can find out in that chapter. It's very interesting. Okay, and yeah, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the word asanga is very important in this connection because the attachment for sense enjoyment and loading it over the material nature is very strong. I think I quoted the verse in the previous class about what is that? How those who are very attached to sense gratification can be freed from this ocean of material nature simply by chanting of the holy name. Haricharyanuvarnanam. Etadyatu rachitanam matra sparsit chayamuhu. Bhava sindhu plavo dristo haricharyanuvarnanam. So haricharyanuvarnanam, chanting the holy name of Lord Hari. Matra sparsit chayamuhu. Those who are too attached with sense gratification. Bhava sindhu plavo dristo. So the only means by which they can get out from this bhava sindhu, the ocean of material world, is Hari Acharyanuvarnanam, chanting Krishna's name. And of course, chanting is not simply chanting. That chanting, attentive chanting, should be uh, accompanied by hearing attentively. So attentive chanting means we are hearing what we chant. So one time, Srila Prabhupada, he was asked by one of his disciples, uh, so this devotee mentioned that Srila Prabhupada, when I chant japa, it's hard to concentrate my mind to Krishna. My mind is always wandering here and there. And Srila Prabhupada said, you don't have to struggle to think about Krishna. You just hear what you chant. You just hear what you chant. That's actually the attentive chanting means. Hearing and chanting they go together. Hmm. Therefore, one must learn detachment by discussion of spiritual science based on authoritative scriptures, and one must hear from persons who are actually in knowledge. As a result of such discussion in the association of devotees, one comes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then first thing one must do is surrender to Him. Okay, the result of hearing among the devotees is actually a lot of purification by which actually we can come closer to Krishna. What is that verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam? Actually, there are so many verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned here, authoritative scriptures. So authoritative scriptures, and the topmost scripture is actually Srimad Bhagavatam. Of course, before studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is very important to study the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So Srimad Bhagavatam is just like a postgraduate study. So after Bhagavad Gita, it is always recommended to continue studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then we will get much more clear understanding about Bhagavad Gita. So I remember after I graduated from Bhakti Sastri, I asked my spiritual master, I graduated from Bhakti Sastri, but I think I don't really understand the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. I said that I think I will take Bhakti Sastri once more. And my spiritual master said that, no, don't do like that. It's just a waste of time. If you want to understand the Bhagavad Gita philosophy better, you continue to studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because there also, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada, he quoted, in his purport, he quoted many verses from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. And it's actually connected because the subject is one, actually, devotional service. The subject is only Krishna consciousness. So authoritative scriptures, hearing from authoritative scriptures, from authoritative persons or a person in knowledge, in that sense is devotees, bona fide devotees, then associating with them will fructify in devotional service, attachment to Krishna. Tulayama lavena pi na swarga na punarbhava bhagavat sangi sangasya martyanam kim utasishaha. So Bhagavat Shangi Sangasya. So there are two types of Bhagavat. Bhagavat Sangi Sangasya. If we associate ourselves with these two types of Bhagavatas, our life will become perfect. Book Bhagavatas and person Bhagavata or devotees Bhagavata. So devotee Bhagavatas means those who are live a life according to the Bhagavata book. Yad Anudyashina Yukta, sorry, what is that? Tulayama Lavenapi Na Swarga Na Punarbhava. And the association of the devotees cannot be compared by the achievement of Na Swarga, by the achievement of heavenly planets, Na Punarbhava, not even liberation. What is the point of getting liberation if we miss the devotees association? So devotees association, the byproduct of associating with the devotees is liberation. But the main purpose of associating with the devotees is that just to develop love of Godhead by hearing from them. So devotees association is actually based on hearing and chanting. Na swarga na punar bhava bhagavat sangi samasham martyanam kim utasi saha. And definitely that cannot be compared to martyanam kim utasi saha. Kim utasi saha cannot be compared with material wealth, which is meant for, which is meant that we will lose the material wealth after we give up this body. Martyam means after we die. After we die, it's automatically that we will also lose our material possession, such as wealth and whatsoever, family members. Martyanam ke mutasi saha. So association of the devotees cannot be compared with anything.
Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Yes, Ram Saran Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Prabhu, you have a question or comment?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, please. Hare
Sorry.
Krishna.
Yeah, if somebody asks, I don't have much time, so what should I prioritize? Should I read the Bhagavad Gita Bhagavatam or chant more? So what should be the answer for that?
Why I don't have time?
He is doing working some in office or something. He has hardly 2 hours in the morning. So
Well, what should be our priority
yes,
between to complete our rounds or reading, right?
yes,
Of course, chanting is the topmost priority because that is one of our vows at the time of initiation, that minimum 16 round
a
cannot be
beginner.
completed.
If he's a beginner in bhakti,
If he is a beginner in bhakti,
yes,
actually you should encourage both chanting and hearing. For example, um, if he doesn't have time to read, this is just a practical way. If he doesn't have time to read on the way to office, how long he will take? Half an hour, for example. He can complete Srila Prabhupada lecture, one lecture, half an hour, whether through phone like this, or if he drive a car, so he can also hear a lecture. So that's that actually the advantage of having ear, even if we are illiterate. We can achieve spiritual advancement by hearing.
Yes.
The owner of this building where I'm staying, whenever he comes home, as soon as he comes home, he immediately play something, whether it is Chaitanya Bhagavad, Srila Prabhupada's lecture, or from Mayapur TV. I always hear it till 10 o'clock at night. So he told me personally, actually, for me, because I'm not that kind of person who loves to do some research and um, analytical study. So for me, hearing is the best. And this devotee, he gives wonderful lecture. Every time he gives lecture is wonderful. He just hear some narration along with the purport. He just hear it, and if he finds something interesting, then he will note it down, and then he just memorize the verse. That's how
Okay.
he, becomes very knowledgeable in sastra.
Okay.
Constant hearing. So this is one of the practical way. If he's a beginner, so you have to encourage both. Definitely, chanting is the topmost priority. But if you have some extra time, you must hear at least one lecture. Srila Prabhupada's lecture is always short. Of
Yes.
course, nowadays ISKCON devotees giving lecture like 1 hour minimum.
Minimum 1 hour. Yes.
And if you see like His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, he loves to give lecture like 2 hours, 3 hours. But of course, that is good. But if we don't have time, Srila Prabhupada's lecture is the best because
Yes.
always short, 40 minutes, I think, approximately 40, 30 minutes. So like this. But you can encourage also, you don't have to read 1 hour every day if you cannot. Just read one page.
Yes.
Just read one page. It may take like maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
Yes.
Vaisisika Prabhu page by page and become a sage. So page by page become a sage. So yeah, like this, for beginner, we have to encourage both, because I observe those who not very acquaintance with philosophy and Krishna consciousness, they will lose the taste of chanting. Why we are reading, why we are studying the philosophy, that is actually just to give us conviction, just give us taste more to chant the holy name. Because philosophy and chanting, they go together. If we simply chant and neglect reading books, then our taste of chanting of the holy name will become loosened, will become slackened.
Yes.
But if we simply reading the books without chanting of the holy name, we will not really understand. We will not have some realization about what we study.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's what I felt, Prabhu, because I was asked this question. So I asked to prioritize more time on chanting,
Hmm.
then maybe few, as you said, few pages, so that not 1 hour a day, they can devote more time on chanting and uh, read. Reading is completely reading is required,
Hmm.
but not ignoring the chanting. That's what I said.
Right, right, right. Yes, that's true.
Govardhana Prabhu, you should mute your mic, Prabhuji.
Who is that? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we can
Thank you,
continue
Prabhu.
now.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Yes. Yeah, definitely. Your suggestion to that devotee is correct. That prioritize chanting, but also accompanied by reading. Okay, text number 5. This is very famous verse. Nirmana moha jita sanga dosa adhyatma nitya vinivritta kamaha dvandvair vimukta sukaduka sanjayar gachantya muda padam avyayam tat. Oops, sorry. Translation: those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the eternal, who are done with material lusts. who are done with material lust, who are freed from dualities of happiness and distress, and who, unbewildered, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, attain to that eternal kingdom. So this is actually the process of surrendering described by Lord Krishna here. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he's emphasizing so much on uh, free from proud, free from pride. So Srila Prabhupada mentioned. The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride, because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature. It is very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So unless one becomes humble,
What?
unless one
Oh,
becomes humble,
I thought
one will not
you
surrender to Krishna. Sorry, somebody say something.
Prabhuji's mic is on Prabhu. Vanamali Prabhu's.
Okay. Yeah. So humility is actually one of the qualities that a devotee should develop. Unless we develop this genuine quality of being humble, actually there is no hope for us to advance in spiritual life. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned in the third verse of Siksastakam that Trinadapi Sunichena, that one must become humble, and that is actually the qualification by which we can chant Krishna's name constantly. So if we want to chant Krishna's name constantly without stoppage, we have to become humble. And actually, if we sincerely chanting, automatically we will derive this humility. Again, it goes like together. It's interconnected between humility and Krishna service, because we cannot serve Krishna properly if we still have some sense of pride. Because of this sense of pride, we tend to be illusioned by honored. By honored, we want honored, we want recognition. I'm senior. This thing, like that's because we are not humble enough. I'm senior, therefore I should be the first. I should be respected. Those who are illusioned by pride is actually uh, will become swayed on the path of devotional service. In many occasions, we find in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's so many examples also that even great devotees, when they are affected by a sense of pride, actually they fall from their position. But of course, Krishna will always give them his mercy and uplift those kind of devotees. Vidya tapo vitair vapur vaya kulai satam gunai sadvira satamet taraihi hitva kavayam vritamana durrisam stabdana pashyanti dama bhuyasha. So this is from the fourth canto, Lord Shiva's instruction to Sati. Uh, so he mentioned there are 6 qualities here. Vidya means knowledge, Vidya tapo austerity, Vidya tapo vita, vita means wealth, vita Vapu means the beauty of the body. Vaya means not old age. Vaya means youth. Vidya tapo vita vapur vaya kulaihi. Kulaihi means family heritage. So these 6 things mentioned by Lord Shiva is actually satam gunai sadbir asatame taraihi. They derive only by those who are pious, who have undergone some pious activities in their previous life. But if we become proud by having all these 6 or even one of these 6, stabdha means pride, stabdha, napashyanti hidama bhuyasha. So we will fail to understand great personalities, both the devotees and also the Lord. So we see the example of Brahma. He was proud that, oh, I'm the head of the universe. I'm the creator in this universe. Nothing can be hidden from me. Therefore, this Brahma Vimohan Lila took place. Krishna wanted to teach Brahma. And also Indra, we see in many occasions, and also Bali Maharaj. And once they become humble, Brahma, Indra, or Bali Maharaj, then only they can surrender to Krishna. As long as they are proud, like Bali Maharaj, he was so proud, he was so wealthy. So Vamanadev asked for 3 steps, and he was laughing. Please ask me for more. 3 steps, it's easy. It's very less. Please ask me more. But then Krishna is always merciful toward his devotees. Even sometimes his devotees going to a wrong path, I would say like that, because the devotees are very dear to Krishna. So Krishna will always give the right direction by which that devotees will come back to Krishna. One of the explanation why we have Sika, for men, why we have Sika, because sometimes it is also our, not sometimes, but most of the times, our tendency is to deviate from the path of devotional service. And because devotees are very dear to Krishna, aham bhakta paradino, Krishna mentioned, then he will pull our Sika, come back. He will pull our Sika to come back to the right path. That's I heard from one of the senior devotees. So this is the surrendering process. So from the first verse up to the 5th verse, we can conclude that the material tree of this, the tree of the material world is very complicated. It is very complex. It is not very easily to be understood. But this tree can be cut off by the asanga sastrena, by detachment. By detachment. And how to get that detachment? Here is the verse. Here is the surrendering process. Detachment can be derived when we surrender to Krishna. That's how we can cut off this material tree and attain to that eternal kingdom. So when we cut the illusion tree, the tree of illusion, then we can come to the real tree, which is the spiritual world. Yeah, we have half an hour. So from text number 6 to 11, we will be discussing about the transmigration of the soul from one body to another body. Natad basayate suryo, text number 6. Nasa sanko napavakaya gatva nani vartante tadhama paramam mama. So to the continuation of the 5th verse, so Krishna is explaining how is that spiritual kingdom looks like. What are the symptoms of the spiritual world? So it is described here. That supreme abode of mind is not illuminated by the sun or moon, nor by fire or electricity. Those who reach it never return to this material world. Tadhama paramamama. Yadgatva na nivartante. Tadhama paramamama. Those who attain the spiritual world will never return. Of course, we understand that originally we are all from the spiritual world, but we come here. But once we return to the spiritual world, we will not come back here again, because we know the reality. We know it's actually a big mistake to step down to the material world. Is a big mistake. Therefore, we will not come back to the material world again, because we got enough lesson. So the supreme abode of Krishna is not illuminated by sun or moon. It doesn't mean that moon and sun they don't exist. They are exist. Otherwise, how Krishna will perform his Nitya Lila? Because Krishna will dance at night with the gopis and will graze the cows with the cowherd boys, with the gopas. Gacharayantam Sakivir Samam Padair. That's very beautiful verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam about the Gopastami. How is that verse started? Tata Chapauganda, Tata Chapauganda Vaya, Tata Chapauganda Vaya Sritau Braje, Babu Atustau Pasupala Samatau, Gacharayantau Sakibir Samampadai, Brindavanam Punyamati Vachakratu. So when Krishna reaches the Pauganda age, which is 6 years, 6 to 10 is actually Krishna's Pauganda age. So at that time, he is allowed to graze the cows in the forest of Vrindavan. Gascharayantam Sakibir Samamparam. So that's happened during the day. And at night, he's dancing with the gopis. So moon and sun, they are exist in the spiritual world, but they don't depend on that. Okay. Sorry, I mean to say they don't depend for illumination, because Krishna's body is illuminating uh, the spiritual world. So they don't depend on sun, moon, or fire or electricity. But fire also exists. I don't know what about electricity. But we here in the material world, we are very much depend on sun and on the moon also, because all the vegetables actually nourished by moon. Without the moonshine, the vegetables cannot be nourished, cannot grow nicely. In the purports, Srila Prabhupada mentioned the spiritual world, the abode of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, which is known as Krishna Loka, Goloka Vrindavan, is described here. In the spiritual sky, there is no need of sun sign, moon sign, fire, or electricity, because all planets are self-luminous. Actually, more elaborately, the description of the spiritual world we can find in the Brahma Samhita, Sriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo, from this onward. Druma Bhumesh Chintani Ganamayi Srotam, Ganamayi Toyam Amritam, Kathaganam Natyam Gamanam Api Vamsi Priya Saki Chirantam Jyoti Paramapi Tadasalam Apcha. Sayatra Shirabdi Sravati Surabhibhyascha Sumahan Nimesadakyo Brajati Nayatra Pisamaya Bhaje Sweta Dvipam Tamaham Yahagolokam Etiyam Vidantaste Santakstir Vila Vidantaste Santakstir Virala Katipaying. So this is actually a very elaborated description from Brahma Samhita, that how actually what is that? Sriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purushakal Pataru. All the trees actually wish fulfilling desire trees. So one tree can give varieties of fruit, and that fruit is actually whatever we desire, the fruit will manifest as that desire. Bruma Bhumis Chintamani, and the ground is not like dirty soil that we find here, but it's Chintamani, it's gem. Toyam Amritam, the water is Amrita, not like the water that we find here in the material world. So you can read that verse, study that verse to know more information about the uh, description of the spiritual world. As long as, what is that? As long as a living entity is in its dark material world, he is in conditional life. But as soon as he reaches the spiritual sky, by cutting through the false, perverted tree of this material world, he becomes liberated, then there is no chance of his coming back here. Of course, the only chance to come back here is that when we desire it to come back here, when we desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. But once we get enough lesson from this material world, how difficult it is, how tough it is, so it is natural for us, we don't want to return again. In his conditional life, the living entity considers himself to be the Lord of this material world, but in his liberated state, he enters into the spiritual kingdom and becomes an associate of the Supreme Lord. There he enjoys eternal bliss, eternal life, and full of knowledge. Satchit Ananda Vigraha. So these qualities, Satchit Ananda Vigraha, will be fully manifest when we reach the spiritual world. Because the very nature of material world is that Achit, Nirananda, and what is that? Sat, and Asat. Everything is temporary. Asat, Achit, full of ignorance here in the material world, and Nirananda. Not always we get happiness, but this Sachit Ananda will manifest in full when we reach the spiritual world, or when we completely pure. Okay, then it will manifest fully. One should be captivated by this information. So very interesting, Srila Prabhupada mentioned here, one should be captivated by this information. What information? The information about the spiritual world. Just like, you are searching in Google, for example, you are searching, where is the best place for holiday? Finally, you find Bali, or you may find Hawaii, and you try to search more information about how Bali looks like or how Hawaii looks like. So information, you should get the information first. Otherwise, you will not get attracted to go there, to that place. So similarly, with the spiritual world, first you have to get the information, how the spiritual world look like, what are the activities there, what are the qualities, what will happen if I go there. This should be uh, stored in our brain, in our heart. Then only we can develop desire to go to the spiritual world. Otherwise, we'll feel, oh, this material world is so nice, I'm fine here. He should desire to transfer himself to that eternal world and extricate himself from this false reflection of reality. For one who is too much attached to this material world, it is very difficult to cut that attachment. But if he takes to Krishna consciousness, there is a chance of gradually becoming detached. So this is the qualities of the spiritual world. Okay, 25 minutes. Text number 7, Mama Ivam So Jival. Okay, this is one of the classical verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Mama Ivam So Jival ke Jiva Bhuta Sanadana. Manasastani Indriyani Prakriti Stani Karsati. The living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the 6 senses, which include the mind. Of course, we know that there are 11 senses, but here Krishna mentioned only 6. That is the Pancha Buddhindriya, including the mind. So most of the time, we are troubled by our mind. We trouble or we enjoy things mostly by the dictation of the mind. Okay, Bandhur atmat manastasya yanat maivat manajita anat manasu tusatruve vartitat maivasatruvat. We discussed this in the 6th chapter, 6 point, what is that, 6.6. So the friend can be best friend when, the mind can be our best friend when we can control the mind. And if we fail to control the mind will become our greatest enemy. So It is also described that when we enjoy something, the mind is actually taking pleasure the most. Okay, when we eat food, okay, stomach is satisfied, but the mind also actually becoming more satisfied. So similarly, if we get distress, the mind is taking this stressful situation up to the most level. Of course, the mind is very subtle, but it is actually very strong and very predominating, very prominent among the senses is the mind. Actually, the mind is dictating the senses. For example, uh, the the eyes, for example, when we see a beautiful girl like this, so the mind immediately dictating uh, the eyes. Through these eyes, actually the mind wanted to enjoy. Or when we smell some nice food, so the nose will send this perception to the mind, and the mind actually will become very agitated to enjoy that. So most of the time we are being troubled when we cannot control our mind, even when distress comes in life. But if our mind is remain sober, and always remember that ultimately this is just pertaining to the body, this distress is pertaining to the body, my only business is to serve Krishna, we will be fine. But when the mind becomes agitated, like, oh, we become mad. Prabhupada mentioned in this verse, the identity of the living being is clearly given. The living entity is fragmented part and parcel of the Supreme Lord eternally. It is not that he assumes individuality in his conditional life and in his liberated state becomes one with the Supreme Lord. So Mayavad is taking advantage of this verse actually, because we are part and parcel of Krishna. After we finish our body, uh, this existence, so our real identity will merge with the Supreme. So that's how the Mayavadi interpret this verse. Inter, inter, interpret interpret this verse. But Srila Prabhupada explained that it is not that we are part and parcel in the sense of we are breaking from the Lord's body. No, we are actually here. Why this word Sanatana is mentioned? Sanatana means eternal. Our individuality is eternal. It is not just like part of a bike, for example, bike, some part of the bike that can go off, and at a certain point of time we can put it back. That is one understanding of being part and parcel. But in our case, we are part and parcel of Krishna, uh, just like I have a son, for example, and my son is coming from me. But my son and me having an individuality eternally separated. Although my son comes from me, and my son will not merge with me, will never become one with me. That's the understanding. So we come from Krishna, but we have our eternal individuality, and we will not merge with Krishna. So this is the understanding. It is not just like the example that I given earlier, just like bike, part of the bike. So at certain point when it's loosened, so it can be attached again and become one. So that is actually not applicable in this understanding between we and Krishna. The word mama imam saha, fragmented part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, are very significant. The fragmented portion of the Lord, of the Supreme Lord, is not like some material broken part. We have already understood in the second chapter that the spirit cannot be cut into pieces. Okay, what is that verse? Anybody still remember that the soul cannot be cut to pieces? Anybody would like to share? So that verse is that Nainam Chindanti Sahasrani.
Nainam Dati Pavaka.
Mhm.
Nainam Kledayan.
Enam Sindanti Sastra.
Nainam Kledayantu.
Enam Dati Pawak.
Yeah, that's the verse. Nainam Chindanti Sahasrani. Soul cannot be cut to pieces. Nainam Dahati Pavakaha. Soul cannot be burned by fire. Nachainam Kledayanti Apo cannot be moistened by water. Kledanti Apo Naso Sayati Maruta cannot be dried up by wind. Soul cannot be cut to pieces. This fragmented, this fragment is not materially conceived. It is not like matter, which can be cut into pieces and joined together again. That conception is not applicable here because the Sanskrit word sanatan, eternal, is used. Okay. We've been discussing that. Text
Prabhu,
number, yes. Any question?
yeah, just to add to this 15.7, Prabhu.
Mhm.
Once I remember I heard Prabhupada says this separated entity means it is eternally existing, because in spiritual world there is no such time as beginning or end. They are eternally existing, means eternally existing, but they are the parts of Krishna. So
Right.
if when you relate it to the time, there will be a beginning and an end. But in the spiritual world, there is no time. Somewhat Prabhupada was explaining on this angle.
Thank you. Yeah. Of course, there is no time, just to add a little bit because that's interesting. It doesn't mean that there is no morning, afternoon, evening, and night in the spiritual world. This phase of time is there, exists, but they are not influenced by time in the sense of everything is eternal, no beginning, no end. Thank you. No old age, nothing. Text number 8. We have 15 minutes. The living entity in the material world carries his different conception of life from one body to another, as the air carries aroma, thus takes one kind of body and again quit it to take another. So yeah, for us, it's easy to understand this fact that reincarnation and whatever we do is actually will determine what we will get in the future. Here, the living entity is described as Iswara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change, the change his body undergoes depend on him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him to the next type of body. Yet yada charati sreshtas. Oh no, what is that? Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. Sorry. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatante kalevaram. So whatever we remember at the time of death, uh, that type of life we will obtain in the next life. And whatever that we perform throughout our life, that what we will remember at the time of death. Okay, so you cannot do whatever nonsense that you want and you are expecting at the end of life you will remember Krishna. No, it doesn't work like that. If he has made his consciousness like that of cat or dog, he is sure to change to a cat or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he will be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. Text number 9. The living entity, thus taking another gross body, obtain a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense object. So Srotram, Chaksu, Sparsanam cha, Rasanam, Granam eva cha, Adhisthaya, Manachaivam, Adhisthaya. So everything is grouped to the mind. Like Srotra means ear, to hear. Srotram, Chaksu, the eyes. Sparsa, the tongue, um, to taste something. Sparsanam cha. No, rasa. Rasanam is the tongue. Sparsa means sense of touch. Sparsa. So Adhisthaya Mana Chaiva. Mana is the leader of the senses. In the purpose, Lord Prabhupada mentioned. In other words, if the living entity adulterates his consciousness with the qualities of cats and dogs, in his next life he gets a cat or dog body and enjoys. Consciousness is originally pure like water, but if we mix water with a certain color, it changes. So consciousness originally, and also the spirit soul originally pure, but when we associate ourselves with the material consciousness, then that consciousness will be polluted, just like rainwater, for example. If we see rainwater from the sky is actually very pure, you can even drink rainwater. But as soon as the rainwater touches the mud, touches the ground, and this rainwater will become contaminated. The color will change, the taste will change, the quality will change. But the rain itself is actually pure. The water is pure. Just like we see the original color of water is transparent, right? But when we add some color powder, red, blue, yellow, whatever, and the water will adjust into that color, will transform into that color because that water is associating with this color powder. So similarly, consciousness is pure. Srila Prabhupada mentioned here that real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Real consciousness is Krishna consciousness. Just like real ego and false ego. Real ego means when we understand that we are Krishna's servant. This is also ego, but this is real ego. But false ego means when we think that we are the master. So our consciousness get polluted because of the association of material modes of nature. Text number 10. The foolish cannot understand how a living entity can quit his body, nor can they understand what sorts of body he enjoys under the spell of the modes of nature. But one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this. So, for example, like all of us who has been practicing Krishna consciousness for some time, so for us, it's easy to understand that reincarnation is real. The reincarnation or death means actually changing of the body, and we don't lament for death. So we get the understanding because we have this knowledge. Reincarnation for the devotees is actually an easy subject matter to understand. But for those who are vimudha nanupashyanti, vimudha means fools. Vimudha, na means not. Pashyanti means see. So they cannot understand, they cannot see the signs of reincarnation, transmigrating from one body to another body of the soul. But for the devotees, it's easy for us to understand. Pashyanti jnana chakshusha. Gyan, we have knowledge. We see through knowledge. Jnana chakshu. Like sastra chakshu. Sastra chakshu, we see through the eyes of the sastra. Gyan chakshu, we see through the eyes of knowledge, spiritual knowledge. The word jnana chakshusha is very significant. Without knowledge, one cannot understand how a living entity leaves his present body. nor what form of body he is going to take in the next life, nor even why he is living in a particular type of body. This requires a great amount of knowledge understood from Bhagavad Gita and similar literatures heard from bona fide spiritual master. Okay, so for us, we understand why some particular soul accept the body of a dog, because he behaves like a dog in his previous life. So like that. There is a question sometimes asked: if God is impartial, why then he put some certain soul into the animal's body or into the poor family? Well, for those who don't have the spiritual knowledge, they will blame God. But for us, we understand it's clearly that everything is due to his previous activities. Okay, finally, the last verse, text number 11. The endeavoring transcendentalists who are situated in the in self-realization can see all this clearly, but those whose minds are not developed and who are not situated in self-realization cannot see what is taking place, though they may try. Purport, I highlighted this part. Only those who are actually in yoga system and have realized the self, the world, and the Supreme Lord, in other words, bhakti yogis, those engaged in pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness, can understand how things are taking place. So yogis here refers to the bhakti yogis. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned here in the beginning part, that actually in the present day, the so-called yogis, like many people opening a yoga club, yoga center, they simply concerned with the external meaning of yoga, which is just the gymnastic activities of the yoga, stretching of the body in order to get good health for better enjoyment. But real yogi, real transcendentalist means the bhakti yogis, the devotees of Lord. Yogi Namapi Sarvesam. We found this in the last verse of the 6th chapter. Okay, those who are engaged in the yoga process, but missing the essence of what yoga is, missing the essence of yoga, which is to become a spiritualist or transcendentalist. If they miss that point, they cannot have spiritual realization, and therefore they remain transmigrate from one body to another body. So this is from a lecture by Srila Prabhupada. Even, what is that, Macmillan Company, their trades manager statistic, they have said that our Bhagavad Gita sale is increasing, other Bhagavad Gita decreasing. In America also, they are seriously studying how this movement is being spread so quickly. People ask me also how it is wonderfully increasing, because there's no adulteration, that's it, that's all. So, and that's a fact. If you don't accept this Krishna consciousness movement, you will never be happy. This is fact. Everything is there: social, political, economical, philosophical, religious, all perfect knowledge. So what is to be done next? And then the devotee said, Prasadam. Prabhupada said, Prasadam? That's the end of the lecture. So the point is that we can cut off this material tree, material bondage, the modes of material nature, and we can stop the transmigrating. We can stop the reincarnation process. Transmigrating from one body to another body is simply by the process of devotional service. Why is Lord Prabhupada in this lecture, he mentioned that if you don't accept this Krishna consciousness movement, you will never be happy. Because real happiness can be derived when we are free from the material entanglement, and the only means is that Krishna consciousness. Okay, thus end my presentation for this session. We have 3 or 4 minutes. If you have a question or comment, you are welcome before I close today's class. Hare Krishna. If there is no, I shall end this class by thanking all of you for participating today's class. Please read the rest of the chapter from text 12 to 20. So we try to finish the 15th chapter in our next class. Thank you very much. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasinni devata patitanam panebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.